This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right. Good morning, Kelly.
Ethan, how are you? What's going on in the great northland of New Hampshire? Snow?
A lot of snow.
A lot of snow.
A lot of snow. It's a good thing I have
snow.
It's a good thing I have a tractor. The benefit of a tractor over a plow is that you can, if you've got a whole bucket full of snow, you can like dump it like way past. It's a good thing because I definitely utilized that this weekend. So
after this, I'm gonna go use my new snow blower.
Ooh, new toy.
I bought it, so I need to use it. Probably really not enough to actually blow, but
just as a tip, if you go to clean out the front of it, make sure you turn the auger off before you do that.
Oh, okay. Are you speaking from experience?
No, but you would think that would be a common sense thing, but that seems to be a common occurrence. Is that the auger will start spinning and then it'll get like snagged on something and stop. So it's because it's stopped that people think they just see that it's stopped and like, oh, I'm gonna go clean it out.
Oh,
but they forget the second that they unclog it, it turns back on, and there goes your fingers.
Yeah, mine has a safety feature that I get it, but as soon as you release both hands from the handle.
I'm trying to think I think my dad's has like is it like the opposite of that, where like you can like hold it down and like press the button and have it basically just stay there without having to like put pressure on it?
You can have the auger turning with one hand.
Yes.
So you can move the thing around, but
you like hold this, and then you let go of this and keep this held down.
Yeah. But as soon as you release the other one, then it stops. What do we got today?
Nice.
Now that we're done talking about Kelly's new snowblower and dismembering old people's fingers.
Per usual, we'll kind of go into the news, and actually couldn't really find a whole lot of super negative stuff, I guess, which is a good thing.
Yep.
So actually this morning, there was a school in Michigan. I'll kind of just read it. So the headline says, anonymous threat causes, high school to go into lockdown. So then it says, an anonymous threat caused a lockdown on Wednesday morning, according to the local police. And the school remains on lockdown as police investigate the anonymous caller.
Mm-hmm.
The school will release the students when police feel it's safe to do so. The school district said there's no verification that the threat is credible at this point, and that was at 9:27 a.m., according to a statement on social media.
We've talked, especially recently, we've talked about moving left of bang.
Yep.
Right? And how we tend to be a reactive society. We wait for something to happen, and then we respond to whatever that is. And in this case, we are responding to a threat, but we're not waiting for that threat to be realized. It's anonymous. We don't know what it is. So we have to ask, okay, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is there's actually a threat. Maybe it's not active right now, but maybe it's a threat. Maybe it's leakage. Maybe somebody's coming in and saying, okay, get ready, I'm coming. We don't know what's going on. So what's the appropriate action, right? We've talked about this. Let's get them into a protective action. Let's get them into a lockdown, a secure at the least, and buy ourselves some time. Let's investigate. Let's see what's going on. And let's figure out what it is that we need to do or not do. This actually ties into our topic for today, which is controlling misinformation and disinformation. And cases like this, we have anonymous. So is this a swatting call? Is this just an anonymous threat? So somebody gets out of school early. Who knows what the intent might be, but let's work through that. So when we're talking about getting ahead of what's going on, because kids are texting moms and dads. I don't know whether it's the type of school, whether it's an elementary, middle, or high school. I don't know that it says that, but irrelevant. Kids are texting moms and dads, and there's information out there. Hey, we're in lockdown. We don't know what's going on. Well, as soon as somebody says that, what happens to the parents? Their anxiety levels go way up, right?
Yeah.
So for us, that's where we need to get ahead of that curve, right? And that's where we need to put out, hey, we have this going on. We don't know exactly. There's no indication that there's any active threat right now. We're trying to figure it all out. We're working with law enforcement. Put out the information so people say, okay, at least my kids are safe. And put out something that says, hey, we're aware of this. We're working with local law enforcement, and we'll let you know in the next 15, 20 minutes what's going on, or beforehand if we find out something else, right? So we can reduce that anxiety. We can reduce the self-deployment of parents to the school. I don't want to get ahead of the actual podcast, but that's exactly what we should be doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They did a good thing by going into lockdown just to kind of alleviate any.
This is one of those things that they did it correctly. They got some information, not aware of actually what's going on. They took some action, and I chalk this up as a win. It seems like it's still an active, ongoing event. But you know
Yeah.
what? Even if it is an actual threat, their students are safe. All the law enforcement that they need is on scene, and they're proactively working to that. And so if something were to actually happen, you got your resources already there. So I chalk that up as a win. I don't know the communications with the parents, but obviously the social media post was there. I'm sure the news is all over this.
Yeah.
So people are being made aware, which is what you want. And you need to make sure that, for me, this is a good thing. And we don't see that enough. This school did it right.
Someone was not scared to press the button,
That's right.
if you will.
Right. Somebody went through what their process was, and they said, okay, we have this anonymous unknown threat. Boop, activated, however they activated it. Because you can, worst case scenario in these things is, or actually best case scenario is, you have people in a protective action, there in this case the lockdown, and you work through it, and it's an unannounced drill on a real case. Now you can look at it and say, okay, what went well? What happened that was supposed to happen? Everything is good. Came to a successful conclusion, and we lost an hour or two of instruction, but we didn't lose any kids. We've identified some gaps, maybe. We saw some things that worked really well. Communications with law enforcement, fire, I don't know if they showed up, but let's look at it and see what went well, and identify any gaps and move on.
You want to talk about misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is the inadvertent spread of false information. So, mistakenly spreading false information. That is
Yeah.
misinformation.
Yeah. So it's like the phone tree, right? Or
Sure.
the phone game, where you start with a message and it gets translated differently each step of the way. And by the time you get down to the end receiver, it's completely different than what actually occurred or what the original message was. And
Mm.
we see this all of the time, right? In active shooter situations, active threats, almost 100% of the time, there's more than one shooter. Reality is there's almost always just one shooter, but the report is that there's two. And we talked about the information based upon perspective. If you're in a school building and you have shots being fired at one end of the hallway. Obviously, the closer you are to that, the more reports you're going to get on that location, right? But there are people somewhere else on campus saying, I'm hearing shots being fired. Where are you? Is the question from dispatch. Where are you? Well, I'm out by the gym or I'm on the football field. Those are different locations. Not being on scene, dispatchers don't interpret the information that says, oh, this might be just different perspectives and different locations of where they're at. But they said, we're getting shots being heard on the football field, right? So now that's a misinterpretation of the information, but it's information. So we're working through that as part of the response problem. And we hear it all of the time. Do we look at it? Yes, until we disprove it, right? And do we respond to assailants? Yes, until we disprove it. But almost all of the time, in the incident, and you can imagine in my incident in California, the communications center received 2,500 911 calls. The assailant initially went to a location, his initial target, but then he got into his car and started driving around the area. When you get something like that, same guy getting reported multiple times, almost a mile away from the original location. And that kind of information says, hey, something's not right here. Maybe there's multiple assailants. And by the time we, sift through all of that information, then it's a couple hours. That's misinformation.
Disinformation is the deliberate spread of false information. So is that like swatting?
How about our story today?
It could be.
Could be.
It could be just a kid trying to get out of a test.
Yep. So if it's, anonymous call, it's a false report, it's deliberately spread, then it's disinformation. And in many cases, disinformation, the big difference for me is misinformation is just what it is. Disinformation can be criminal. A false report of a crime in most states is a criminal offense. If the initial report was legitimate, but then somebody deliberately starts injecting disinformation into the scenario that causes a delay, injury, or maybe death, can be held responsible for those criminally and civilly. From my perspective, it just happens. The other one is deliberate and can be, and in often cases, is criminal.
Well, there you go. That was it.
Yeah.
See you next week. No.
Yeah. I mean, the big issue to us is what's the difference during the emergency?
I would think the initial start is the same. You have to just assume that it's real no matter what, because you've said this before. It's like, let's say you assume it's real and you do all the things you're supposed to do, and then it turns out it's not real. Okay, then like, what's the harm? Like, you've lost some time. It was an inconvenience, but like, no one gets hurt. Everyone's alive. Okay.
You probably learned something along the way.
Right? Probably learned something. And then it's like, but if you flip it and you say, I don't really think it's real, let's just kind of like, whatever, let's not do the correct procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out to be real, that's when people get hurt.
That's right.
So,
and that's the difference. And you're absolutely right. And it's being recorded, so you can tell everyone that I said you were absolutely right.
I did preface that by saying that I think you've said this before, so I was really just
lots of times is false reports are disinformation, but we don't know until we look into it. Misinformation is incorrect information. We have to look at them at the same. We have to do our due diligence to really address the information that we have. And one of the aspects of emergency response is understanding the information that you have. And there's a phenomenon called paralysis by analysis, where everyone wants the best information and they're trying to figure out what's going on and they're not taking action. In most cases, that doesn't cause us any issues. But in an emergency or a potentially significant event like active threat, active violence, we have to deal with the information that we have. And what does that mean to us? What's the worst that could happen? And we have to mitigate that by taking action with just the information. So when we do threat assessments, as soon as we receive a threat, we look at, is that threat potentially harmful to our students and our staff? If you can't answer that one way or the other, what's your next step? Right? You have to take the information that you have. Don't look at, oh, we need to really find this person and interview them. And we need to find out all of the information before we do anything. Well, we know that that can take way too long, right? We have evidence of that in recent shootings. That can take too long. But if you say, wow, this is potentially bad, I need more information, hit the button, get everyone into a protective action, slow things down for you, buy time so that you can inject interrogation and investigation or the location of the person who is likely to carry out this or even identify who that is. We need to get ahead of that and look at what it is that we have, not what we need. We can figure that out in a little bit.
You know, as you're talking about this, like something kind of like popped up. I think it's applicable. I'm just trying to say it the right way. It's almost like we're trying to play poker. Like, you know how you lay down one card, like you have your cards in your hand, and you're trying to determine whether you should call or fold or whatever, right? Based on the one card that's placed in front of you. You're calculating the odds of you winning that hand. And then they throw down another card. Now your odds have either increased or decreased based on now the two cards in front of you. And it's like, we're not playing poker. We're not trying to wait until the last card is played and then you decide, okay, I'm going to fold or call, whatever. It's like,
right. But there is a thought process. I'm not a
yeah.
poker player.
I'm
I've
not
played
either.
poker.
You
I've
could probably
played
tell
poker.
I'm not. I'm probably not saying it right.
Yeah. So,
but it's very similar.
Right. But we have to make a decision. When you have you get dealt 3 cards first. Is that right? Whatever it is.
I think you get dealt 2 cards.
Okay. But then
and then I think in total they lay down 5 cards. I think it's 5 cards. I think in total with your hand plus the cards on the table, I think it's 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a full house would be
at different times, right? But you
sure.
use 5 of those 7 cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
To play your hand. So every step of the way, you have to make a decision.
Yes.
And you get dealt your first 2 cards and you look at it and you go, nah, you try not to make a face, I guess, but you look at it and then they give you one piece of information.
Yeah.
And you have to make a decision. Do I go forward or do I wait for another piece of information?
Mm.
So from that aspect, you're absolutely right. Oftentimes we're dealt 2 cards. We have 2 pieces of information. And what is it that we need to take action? If we're looking at the worst case scenario and we're saying, this is anonymous, it is potentially a threat. I wonder what the information actually was that caused the threat, the anonymous, right? That's all the information you have right now. Sometimes you can't wait till the next card is thrown, because that might be tragic, as we've seen in recent cases. They're trying to find how many cards, they're trying to get all of that information, as opposed to pushing the button and saying, let's buy some time, let's get that information that we need, but let's protect everyone first. When we're talking about getting ahead of the information curve, we understand that there are things that are happening that are so fast with social media, text groups, phone tree effect, where all the families are calling each other. Did you hear? Did you hear? Hey, did you see this? What's happening? We understand that process. And we understand that we are likely going to be behind the curve pretty quickly, right? So how do we start getting in front of that curve? How do we start getting the information that we have? We have to look at the protection factor first and then the investigative fact next. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's put out the information. Hey, we talked about this in the article. Hey, we have this going on at our school right now. We're in the initial stages. Law enforcement's been called. Fire and medics are coming. We don't have any injuries at this point, but we're trying to figure it out. But we want to be prepared if something were to happen. And then, go to your website, the school's website, go to your district website, and we'll have more information there. We want to start pointing people to the right sources of information so that they're not making things up, because the human brain is an amazingly difficult thing to deal with in an emergency. It starts filling in gaps. It'll take gaps and put in a logical step between there. And It might be 30 steps, right? What happened? Boop, 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 boop. Oh, this must have happened. A lot of our families, especially younger families, tend to jump to worst case scenario. And
that's probably true.
They lack the experience, right? So when we start looking at what's the information, let's see what the information is. Let's figure out what's going on, because they're not going to have any impact in the immediate future. So they start worrying about things. Oh my God, what if it's my child that's injured? What if this? What if that? Let's figure that out. But if we're slowing things down and we're building time barriers, then it's easy for us to investigate and respond if necessary, and get the information out as it's coming in.
Kind of reminds me of a moment I had last night. I was going out to feed the animals, and I heard this like loud cracking of branches outside.
Mm-hmm.
It was dark, so for some reason my mind immediately went to like, am I like about to like be charged by like a moose or something? Because like I've never heard that many branches crack and all that like at once.
Did you run?
No,
or did you wait for the moose to attack you?
No, I kind of just stood there, to be honest.
That's not what we want.
Trying to figure out what it was, but then I realized I went back and got my headlamp. That's right, because I was actually going out to the store, so I wasn't going out to feed the animals. But when I went to go feed the animals, I had my headlamp, and I went down there, and a tree had actually just fallen down. My mind just instantly like it goes to like for some reason an animal coming out of the woods was more of a logical thing than a tree falling down.
Right.
I don't know what the statistics there are, but my wife's convinced that it wasn't the tree had already been falling down, but I'm like, I don't remember that tree being laid down like that before, but whatever.
The fact is you had information and you went to obviously it didn't hit you. So the next best scenario for you is a moose is going to run out at any minute and Bullwinkle is going to run over you.
I love that show.
Do you know that there's actually in the United States, I think it's worldwide, but especially in the United States, more people are killed by moose than bear?
Mm-hmm. I believe it. Probably
that's a legitimate fear.
I bet it's because people don't realize like how dangerous moose are. I think everyone kind of understands like a bear could like shred you apart.
Yeah.
But they don't understand. They see a moose and they kind of see this gentle giant walking through, and it's like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah, they're angry giants. And
yeah, they're
what
big.
People also don't understand is how big they are, right?
They're huge.
The biggest problem I have with your story is you didn't take any protective action. You just sat there waiting for the moose to come.
Well, I was near the duck coop, so I could have run in there if.
Oh, that would have helped. You and your protective ducks.
Yeah, they would have quacked and scared the moose.
The reality is there's information, and you had information, and you jumped to this worst case scenario for you. But it does illustrate the point that we start making things up
Yeah.
in all reality. And is it logical that noise came from a moose? Yeah, there's logic there. You live in an area where there's moose, and we live in a society where there's acts of violence in schools. So when you hear something going on, there's lots and lots of reasons that you would be placed in a lockdown that don't have to do with active shooter and acts of violence. So, and this is a perfect example. We got a report of a threat. Let's take the appropriate action if that threat were to manifest itself and go operational right now. Let's take some action there. And let's make sure that everyone understands exactly what we should be doing here. But that leads to, how do we get there the fastest with the most accurate information, I guess.
You mean just pressing a button that only does lockdown and doesn't do anything else?
Yeah.
It's not
So
going to help you out.
yeah. So I mean, right. So that's all part of, what's the number one. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's the number one complaint during an after action as to what has to be worked on during an incident? Number one complaint: communications.
And
Right.
then the second one's communication. And then the third one is communication.
Communications, right? And it never fails. Hey, what do you think we should improve on? Communications. I didn't hear this. I didn't know this. Why didn't you tell me? Where should I have been? I thought you were over here, but you never communicated that. I never knew that, right? So it's always communications. And how do we get ahead of that? Well, the first thing is understanding the workflow of the emergency. That's why a lot of times when I start training, I want to go through the timeline of an emergency. And when you understand the timeline and the workflow of a crisis like an active threat, then you can start identifying, well, it would be good if I communicated with this group, with this stakeholder, these parents. It'd be good if I was able to communicate here to get ahead of that beforehand, right? To get ahead of that information. And if information is already out there, I can give them the best information and designate my source, me, as the source to go to. Here, this is the official source, this is the official information. The best way to do that is have a crisis communications plan that says, if you are a high school principal and you have an active threat situation, are you also responsible for communicating with everybody? Chances are
Probably not.
Yeah, not going to have time. They're
Yeah.
not going to have time. So how do I get ahead of that as an incident commander? Even though I'm responsible for everything that happens, I'm not responsible for actually doing it. Assign somebody. Hey, if this happens, you're responsible for making all the notifications to the school district. You're responsible for communicating with law enforcement and having them come to me and giving them the best information. You're responsible for communicating with our families, social media, updating the website. Get through that. Make sure that everyone understands that. And, obviously with technology today, with a single press of the button, you can do that to almost every stakeholder. You can put that out so that people understand. You can share that information and make sure that the right people have the right information. I will bet you that the crisis communication plan is not as robust as it should be, but even more so, it's not practiced. It's probably practiced less than your regular drills.
Why wouldn't you have it go hand in hand when you do a drill?
Because a fire drill is just a fire drill. A active threat drill is a lockdown drill. Everyone knows what they're doing.
But it's muscle memory.
It's muscle memory.
You have
So,
to learn who to contact. It all takes some type of even physical action, but it's like a brain muscle memory thing. Like,
yep,
you want to be quick,
I
and
want to be quick. I want
you don't
to,
want to have to think about, oh, who is I supposed to talk to that's supposed to send out the social media stuff?
right?
Who was that again? But if you
Yeah,
have that in your drill, you know that person by name instantly.
right. Press this button and it shoots it to the communications director
Yeah.
or what have you, right? If communications is the number one item that needs to be improved upon, why aren't you practicing that with every drill? And why isn't your communications director part of that? And you say, well, because my communications director doesn't have time to work through 20 different drills by each of my buildings, but they do, right? Because all you have to do to practice your communications plan is communicate. If you are required to notify somebody, make sure they get notified and they can say, okay, that part of the plan worked. So at the building level, you've exercised the building side of that plan. At the district level, they acknowledge and then they say, okay, from here, here's what I would do. They don't have to do anything other than, okay, I need to contact the cabinet, the superintendent, board members, prepare a statement, send out notifications to our families, to the community, social media, what have you. That took 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You're telling me that they don't have time? They have time. The other part of that is when, I'm a big advocate of tabletops.
Tabletop man.
I am. And if you sit down with your safety team, your building level safety team, and you should be doing this every month based upon the scenario of your drill that you're going to perform during that month. You should sit down a week or two in advance of that drill being executed with your safety team and talk through the scenario. We're going to have a fire drill. Okay, here's the scenario. Fire in the library. Locate the fire in the library. What does that mean? How is that impacted? So you have the fire, you have fire departments coming. You also probably have law enforcement coming because they're going to help with any traffic issues, any security issues that you may have, and just generally help with the incident. How do you communicate with them? How do you communicate with the district saying we have a fire? How do we communicate with the parents? Whose responsibility is it? You should be asking these questions during your tabletop. Do you got this? Yes. All right. What are you doing? How are you communicating? What's the channels in which you're using to communicate with the proper stakeholders? Every drill that you do should include that communications piece. You should understand the crisis communications plan and who you are responsible to contact. There's only 5 or 6 people because then they're going to contact the next level, right? You say, okay, our team has to contact the superintendent, the board members. Maybe the superintendent's going to contact the board members, but make sure that that's a thing. I need to contact law enforcement and those people who are helping me. I need to contact the media and saying this is what's happening. This is what we're working on. And I need to post something in on the school's website. Get ahead of that. Make sure that you understand that. When you actually have the drill, walk through it. Pull the fire alarm, make the phone call, send the alert to the communications director. Can you handle this? I'm too busy. If you're not too busy, then you handle it. I mean, it's one of those things, but it's really understanding the plan and exercising it as often as you do every drill. Not just, oh, we're going to do this just during active violence drills, lockdown drills. We're going to do this with every drill because each scenario creates a different level of information that's needed by your stakeholders. They mean different things.
The times of communicating might be different. The who you communicate might be contacted at different times, or it's going to be different in some way on each scenario. So,
and even if it's exactly the same, what are we creating? Muscle memory.
Muscle memory. Yep.
Right? Our brains are working towards that. This is as important as any other aspect of your emergency plans. Are we going to reunify? In this morning's article, are we going to adjust school at all? We're going to early release? We're going to have an alternative schedule? Are we just going to say, okay, we had this threat, it was anonymous, we found out that there's no credible threat, so we're going back to business. We lost an hour, so whatever the next period would be scheduled, that's the period we're going to go to, right? Or that's the activity that we're going to engage in. So make sure everyone understands that, right? And, for those who haven't experienced a lot of these anonymous reports of threats, I have, and they've become the new false report of an explosive device. We went years and years and years without a bomb threat. But when I was at the school, we didn't go a couple months without a anonymous threat of an active shooter.
Wow.
You're going to get used to this. So let's get ahead of it. You can, was this anonymous? Yes. Do we want to do a full-blown lockdown every time we receive a threat? The information that you have to make that decision. I'm not saying yes, every time you get an anonymous threat, you have to take protective action. I will say that if you look at it and say, I don't know. If you don't know, then press the button.
Yeah. No one's going to blame you for it. I mean, no one should be mad at you.
That's right. You might get it. I mean, I've had to deal with that. You shouldn't have done this without asking me first.
That's the worst. I feel like that's the worst thing to say.
It is. Absolutely is. Well, it's not the worst thing.
It's up there, but
yeah. So
you're basically discouraging people from doing the right thing.
Yes, right, and that's exactly right. We had a case. We've talked about this where we had a report of a gun on campus at a high school in the bus loop of the high school, and ultimately turned out to be some guy was having car issues and he was holding a radiator hose that on the camera looked like a gun. When we found that out, one of the first statements that I heard from some of the staff members was the young lady that reported it should be punished. Literally.
That's crazy.
We need to stop this. You need to punish her. No, you should send her up on stage and say, thank you for doing that. That was exactly the right thing to do. Here's your award for bravery for doing it. This is not something that we should be doing anything but praising her for. You know how much courage that took for her to walk out there, see what she thought was a gun, turn around, walk back and report it and say, I think that was a gun. Why do you think that? Well, this is what I saw. And I will tell you that I went back after the fact, looked at the video, and I would tell you that if I had seen that video beforehand, I would have said, that's a gun.
And you're like experienced. Like you know what a gun looks like.
Yeah. I would have said, and in a flash, I would have said, yep, that's a gun. No doubt about it that I would have said, that's what I would have said.
If it was a gun and she waited longer to determine that might have been too late. You never know.
She'd forgotten her homework in her car. And so she was given permission to run out to go get her homework. And If she had continued, she could have been victim one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like today in that article, it's probably going to end up being nothing.
Yeah.
But everyone did it correctly. And that's what we're asking for. Do it correctly. That's what we expect. Unfortunately, that's what we expect. If you get this threat and you're not aware of what it is or how, you got to take some action. It's just, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Right? I'm not really that sorry. It's just the way it is. It's something that we have to do, unfortunately. But we have to do that to protect our kids and to create that muscle memory.
You said a very important thing there. Makes me want to ask you the question of, what would you say to someone that says that's not my job? I didn't sign up for this.
Well, you know what my answer is. It is your job. It's exactly your job. It's been your job forever. It just looks different now than it did 50 years ago. But this is your job. It's always been your job to protect kids. Society has changed. The definition of protection and protecting your kids has changed. So it's been your job. It's always been your job. Press the button.
It's almost like, don't blame the people who are expecting this of you. Blame the people that didn't teach it to you in the first place.
Yep.
That's what I
Yep.
would say.
Yep.
Be angry with the people that didn't give you all the information to say, this is something you're going to have to do.
I am telling you right now, the vast majority of our educators in our schools today started teaching after Columbine.
Yeah.
There is zero reason you shouldn't know this. Zero.
You have some tolerance there too, right? Because you've got, even if you were born 6 years before that, like, did you really know what Columbine was? Because, like, I was born in 91. I don't remember, maybe because I was sheltered. I don't know.
But you're not
like
in.
I was, how old was I? 6 years old, 7 years old? It was 1999.
It was in '99.
So I was 8
So
years old.
yeah,
8 years old, I don't remember Columbine even happening.
but you didn't get into education,
Right. Right. But I'm saying, like,
right?
you could have been born, you could be my age as an educator, and, like, I feel like for you to really understand what Columbine was, I feel like you would have had to been a little bit older, and then, like, getting into education, you would have, like, thought about it. But, like, if you were getting into education, if you're the same age as me, you got an education, I don't think you would be thinking, what if something happens at my school that's like Columbine? I don't think you would have. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
If you started the day after Columbine, you would know about it, right?
right,
If
right,
you started school 4 years after Columbine, you would know about it.
yes,
If you started school yesterday to become a teacher, you would know about it. Anything that occurred, you should know about it. If you don't, somebody is withholding information from you. There,
yeah.
we're 26 years and you haven't done your due diligence. What does this mean?
It's like a form of disinformation. I feel like not giving you all the details is kind of just lying to you. That's how I feel about lying.
You're correct there, but here's the issue, right? I'm not sure, I could be wrong on this, that we've gone an entire year without a shooting.
You don't think we have?
I don't think we have since.
No, I don't think we have. Because I was looking this all up. I don't think we've gone a year without a shooting for at least, gosh, what, 15 something years at least?
So maybe it's not Columbine you're aware of. It's the fact that this is a thing,
Yeah.
right? So this is one of those things that you sit there and you go, how can you not understand it? This is what frustrates me. How can you not understand that this is part of your duties? If it is part of your duties, what are my responsibilities there? If this could happen, I'm just asking for myself, selfishly. If I'm in an environment that this can happen, What are my responsibilities to myself? The next question is, what are my responsibilities to those around me?
Those that I'm responsible for.
Those that I'm responsible for. And then you go out to that third question. How about the other people in my school that I'm not necessarily responsible for? But the fact that they're in your school and you're a school employee now makes you responsible for them.
Kind of went off on a little tangent there, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good one.
It's a form of, I feel like, of disinformation for sure. I feel like whether it's, willful ignorance or what, but it's
But
like,
if you're not asking the right questions, if you're not getting the information and you're in a school system, you're a teacher, educator, administrator, whatever, bus driver,
can't forget
and
about those.
bus drivers, janitors, food
Yeah.
service employees, all the employees throughout the district have essentially the same responsibility. If you're not asking those questions, if you don't have the information, you have to ask the question. What are my responsibilities for myself? What happens if? What am I supposed to do? How do I communicate? What's the best way to communicate? Who do I communicate with? Right? That's what we're all talking about is the information. If you are in a school, I'm going to say this. If you're working in a school and you don't understand your responsibility for the safety of your students, you are not asking, and almost, I'm not going to say willfully doing it, but on the low end of this, you're lazy. On the high end is willful. I am not going, I don't want to know this. I don't want to do this.
This
Try to
is why you
assess me.
guys need to watch the YouTube videos, because you just get a whole different feel.
Yeah. The
Oh man,
the frustration is, we're coming up on 26 years after Columbine.
crazy.
And we look at the information that's available after that, and we look at the results of that incident. And when I say results, we look at all of them. Looking at the amount of trauma that is caused to those who weren't injured, those who were impacted indirectly or directly, depending on your perspective, by that incident. It's huge. Those high school seniors, who were the oldest at the time, are now 26 years older. So they're approaching 50. I'm trying to do the math. Let's say 17, 26.
Yeah.
That makes it 53 years old. Is that right? 43.
43. Yeah.
43 years old that have been dealing with this trauma, trying to reconcile what happened and deal with this for 26 years. They're now 43 years old.
And those people are the ones that keep seeing school shootings on the news every single year. And I'm sure every time they see it, it just brings everything back.
If our job is not to protect every kid in that school, then we're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
As an outsider, I've never been an educator, never had a desire. I would not do well being an educator. Nope, wouldn't do it. Especially in today's society.
Probably not.
A little bit too straightforward for a lot of people. I get it, but you are there for this. We are here to protect those kids. And when you say, well, I did such and such, yeah, we lost 4 people, but we saved 200 others or 300 others or whatever the numbers are. Did we? What about all of those others that were impacted because we didn't make the decision to initiate a lockdown before things started happening? We have to ask ourselves that. If we're going to continue to be a response, generated, motivated society, we're going to continue to see this stuff. We're going to wait for things to happen.
Things have to happen in order for you to respond to them.
Right? Panic buttons. I'm gonna get on this tangent real quick, and then we're way over on our time. But panic buttons are meant for when you panic. Panic buttons are limited in their use to when things, I need somebody here right now. But it's an all or nothing kind of thing. And do I think panic buttons are needed? Yes, I do. I used to not, but I've come around. Panic buttons are needed for a very limited use scenario. But we have so many other things that we are more likely going to use an alert for, or we need to have a lockdown without notifying law enforcement, without bringing all of the entire army in to save us. And if you're relying solely on a panic button, you're being reactive and response oriented, and you're going to wait for something to happen before you press that button. And if you're waiting for that, it's too late. You're not going to be successful. Get away from that mentality. Move everything left before it happens. If you have information of a threat, even if it's misinformation, worst case scenario is you're going to lose some people, but it hasn't started yet. Take action. If all you have is a panic button, press the button before the shots are fired. If you have other options, which you should have other options, pick the appropriate action, press the button for that action. Our job is to prevent it from happening, not to respond to it after it started.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.